Trump had dinner with Qatar's Prime Minister Al Thani in New York last night. The Prime Minister also met with Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The meetings follow Israel's attack on Qatar's capital, which targeted Hamas officials on Tuesday. Qatar is a major U.S. ally in the region. MTS Taya.
The Middle East is once again at the heart of global diplomacy. This week, Israel launched a deadly strike on Doha, Qatar, targeting a Hamas meeting, but killing a Qatari security official alongside several Hamas members. The strike immediately complicated U.S. efforts to mediate peace and raised urgent questions about alliances, security, and the fragile path toward ending the Gaza war. Now, Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al Thani, has arrived in New York to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump. Their high-stakes dinner meeting follows a series of urgent talks with Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. At issue is not just Israel's military action, but the broader challenge of negotiating a ceasefire, maintaining U.S.-Qatar relations, and charting a possible way forward in the Israel-Palestine conflict. This is the story of diplomacy under pressure, where every move is scrutinized, and the stakes are nothing less than the future of regional stability. Chapter 1. The strike on Doha. The week began with shockwaves across the Gulf. Israel struck a Hamas meeting in Doha, a move described as an attempt to eliminate militant leadership, but one that resulted in the deaths of a Qatari security officer and 5 Hamas members. The attack was widely seen as unprecedented, as Israel had never before targeted the Qatari capital directly. For Qatar, the incident was both a tragedy and a violation. The strike took place in a city known more for diplomacy than for warfare, where negotiations on conflicts from Afghanistan to Sudan have been quietly brokered. The deaths, especially of a Qatari national, struck at the heart of Doha's sense of sovereignty. For Israel, the operation was presented as part of its broader campaign to dismantle Hamas networks. Yet the timing, just as Hamas representatives were reportedly discussing a new ceasefire proposal from Trump, fueled suspicions that the strike was not only military but also political, designed to complicate ongoing negotiations. Chapter 2. Trump's reaction. In Washington, former President Donald Trump expressed clear frustration with Israel's move. Calling himself very unhappy with the targeting of Qatar, Trump suggested the strike undermined U.S.-backed ceasefire discussions. His remarks were notable. The United States has long defended Israel in international forums, often blocking or softening resolutions critical of its military actions. For Trump to voice dissatisfaction publicly suggested the complexity of balancing U.S. ties with both Israel and Qatar, 2 important allies with conflicting agendas. Still, Trump stopped short of direct condemnation. Instead, his administration framed the incident as an obstacle to diplomacy. Ahead of his dinner with Sheikh Mohammed, Trump signaled that talks would focus on restoring confidence, ensuring U.S.-Qatar relations remain stable, and pushing forward with ceasefire negotiations in Gaza. Chapter 3. Qatar's diplomatic push. Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed wasted no time launching a diplomatic offensive in Washington. He first met Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, discussing Israel's strikes, regional security, and the U.S.-Qatar partnership. Qatar's strategy was clear: reaffirm its role as a U.S. ally while making it plain that strikes on its territory were unacceptable. Doha hosts the Al Udeid Air Base, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, and has positioned itself as a vital partner in counterterrorism, energy, and diplomacy. By moving quickly to engage top American officials, Sheikh Mohammed demonstrated Qatar's determination to protect its sovereignty while ensuring its partnership with Washington remained intact. Chapter 4. The U.S.-Qatar Alliance. The relationship between the United States and Qatar is multifaceted. Beyond the military base, Qatar is a major supplier of natural gas and plays an outsized role in diplomatic mediation across the Middle East. From facilitating talks with the Taliban to hosting negotiations on Sudan, Doha has carved out a reputation as a neutral broker. For Washington, this makes Qatar indispensable. But Israel's strike complicates matters. If Qatar perceives that the U.S. is unable or unwilling to prevent such attacks, its trust in American protection could erode. On the other hand, if the U.S. leans too heavily on Israel, it risks straining one of its closest regional alliances. Trump's meeting with Sheikh Mohammed, therefore, is more than symbolic. It is a test of whether Washington can balance two partnerships that are increasingly in tension. Chapter 5: The United Nations steps in. The international community quickly reacted to the strike. In an unusual move, the United States joined other members of the UN Security Council in condemning Israel's attack on Qatar. This was a departure from Washington's typical role of shielding Israel from criticism. The condemnation highlighted a growing consensus that the conflict in Gaza and its spillover into other countries poses a global threat to peace and security. At the UN General Assembly, momentum built around reviving the two-state solution, with France, Saudi Arabia, and others pushing for collective action. For Qatar, UN backing provided a degree of international legitimacy in its outrage. For Israel, however, the condemnation raised concerns about losing diplomatic ground, especially as some Western states move closer to recognizing a Palestinian state. Chapter 6: Rubio's dual role. Adding to the complexity was the role of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. While participating in talks with Qatar, Rubio announced plans to travel to Israel for a 2-day visit. There, he was expected to reassure Israeli leaders of America's support and push back against international moves toward Palestinian recognition. This dual role underscored the delicate balance of U.S. diplomacy, engaging Qatar as a partner while reaffirming commitments to Israel. Rubio's statements emphasized shared goals, such as ensuring Hamas no longer governs Gaza and securing the release of hostages. For observers, Rubio's itinerary reflected the tightrope the U.S. must walk. Any tilt in one direction risks alienating the other. Chapter 7: Momentum toward a two-state solution. The strike and subsequent diplomacy unfolded as the international push for a two-state solution gained new energy. At the UN, a resolution called for renewed negotiations, with backing from European powers and Gulf states. Saudi Arabia and France led calls for collective action to bring the war in Gaza to an end and secure a lasting settlement. While the two-state solution has long been the framework for peace, it has repeatedly stalled amid political realities. The latest crisis, however, appeared to be shifting global opinion, with more states openly supporting recognition of Palestine. For Qatar, which has long advocated for Palestinian rights, this momentum aligned with its diplomatic priorities. For the U.S., however, it presented challenges, given Israel's firm opposition to unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. Chapter 8: Humanitarian toll. Beyond diplomacy, the war in Gaza continues to exact a staggering human cost. Reports indicate more than 64,000 people have been killed since the conflict's escalation, with many more injured or displaced. Civilian infrastructure, from hospitals to schools, has been devastated. The strike on Doha added another layer to the tragedy, extending the violence beyond Gaza's borders. For many, the incident highlighted the risk of regional spillover, where neighboring states could be dragged into direct conflict. The humanitarian dimension underscores why international actors, from the UN to individual states, are intensifying calls for a ceasefire and political resolution. Without it, the toll will only grow. Chapter 9: Regional power dynamics. The incident also sheds light on broader regional dynamics. Qatar, despite its small size, wields influence through wealth, diplomacy, and media platforms like Al Jazeera. Its rivalry with some Gulf neighbors, such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia, has shaped past crises but also opened doors for mediation. Israel's strike on Doha could shift these dynamics, potentially driving Qatar closer to states advocating stronger pressure on Israel. At the same time, Saudi Arabia's role in promoting a two-state solution suggests a rare moment of convergence between Gulf states and European powers. For Washington, navigating these shifting alliances will be critical. Any misstep could weaken its influence in a region already full of competing interests. Chapter 10: The dinner in New York. Trump's scheduled dinner with Sheikh Mohammed in New York became the focal point of this unfolding drama. While the location remained undisclosed, its symbolism was unmistakable. two leaders meeting at a time of crisis to decide the next steps. Discussions were expected to cover Israel's strike, U.S.-Qatar security cooperation, and ongoing ceasefire negotiations. Observers also noted the broader backdrop of U.S. domestic politics, where foreign policy decisions increasingly play into election year debates. The outcome of the dinner may not produce immediate breakthroughs, but it represents a critical moment in U.S.-Qatar relations. The ability to manage tensions while advancing the goal of peace in Gaza will shape the path forward. Chapter 11: The Road Ahead. As Sheikh Mohammed and Trump sit down in New York, the stakes could not be higher. Israel's strike on Doha has introduced new uncertainty into already fragile ceasefire talks. Qatar seeks reassurances from its American ally, while the U.S. tries to balance commitments to both Qatar and Israel. Meanwhile, international support for a two-state solution grows, humanitarian suffering deepens, and regional alliances shift. The outcome of this diplomatic moment may not end the conflict, but it will set the tone for what comes next. Will the U.S. be able to manage its dual loyalties? Can Qatar maintain its role as a mediator while protecting its sovereignty? And will the push for a two-state solution gain real traction or falter once again in the face of entrenched opposition? For now, the world is watching closely. The Doha strike, the U.S.-Qatar meeting, and Israel's next moves will all play into a larger puzzle that includes the United Nations, regional powers, and ordinary civilians caught in the crossfire. Each actor has its own priorities: security, sovereignty, survival, or diplomacy. But all are bound by the same reality. The longer the conflict continues, the more dangerous the path ahead becomes for the Middle East and the international order. The deadly strike on Doha and the flurry of diplomacy that followed highlight how fragile the Middle East remains. Every action, whether military or diplomatic, carries ripple effects across the region and the world. As Qatar and the U.S. work to navigate the fallout, the broader questions of peace, justice, and security remain unresolved. What do you think? Can diplomacy overcome violence in this conflict, or will strikes and counterstrikes continue to dictate the future of the region? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dive documentaries into the events shaping our world.